pointed at restrictions on legal immigration. Is that necessary? What kind of restrictions are you talking about?
We've got a problem. We've got to secure the border. We've got to enforce the law. No amnesty. If someone wants to be a citizen, they need to go back to their country of origin and go down the normal pathway. The legal immigration process, it should be one based on standing up and making priority number one, American workers, American wages, and a strong way to improve the American economy.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. That was a fun moment. I think it was last week on Special Report. Scott Walker stopped by our Fox studios and did a sit-down with Brett Baer. And on that issue of the number of legal immigrants coming into the country, and Jeb calls them economic immigrants. That's a new phrase. Scott Walker was just, look, anything we should do should be to the benefit of America, the American family, the American workers who haven't seen a wage increase in 15 years. And I think that was music to the ears of many Americans across this country. Isn't it refreshing to hear politicians who say things like, well, of course we love immigration, but it has to work for America? In just a few moments, we're going to talk to Governor Scott Walker here on the Laura Ingraham Show. He's going to be joining us. We want to make sure our connection is good. It's amazing that, Mike, don't you always find this amazing that we have this great technology of cell phone.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, cell phones in this country. All these great advances in technology. And I think most of the time, cell calls are awful. I mean, they're just not clear. And they really haven't improved them. And can you hear me now? No, I can't hear you now. And just shut up. I can't hear you. Exactly. So we're going to talk to him. I think he's back on. So we'll join with him now. Governor Walker, are you here with us on the Laura Ingraham
Show? Yeah, glad to be with you.
How you doing?
Thanks for having me on.
I didn't want to have a 1 or 2 second delay with you, Governor, because then I would think he's stalling. He doesn't want to answer the question. So
I feel like talking in a stadium, where you got to wait for a second to catch up.
I got you. First of all, you were in Oklahoma over the weekend, the big Southern Leadership straw poll, and I guess Ben Carson came in first. You came in second. But the reviews of your performance there, I'm looking at the Washington Examiner piece, pretty phenomenal. I mean, Carson had lots of people supporting him there, but you got a great review from the crowd. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was good feedback. I think both Ben Carson and Ted Cruz had an organized effort, and give them credit for that. They had, paid for folks to be there the whole bit. We go to those events, speak, but we don't organize. We figure our organization's going to come out in the field should we get in. It's going to be in the caucuses and the primaries, but yeah, the response was great. People, I think are hungry. As I pointed out the other day, they want someone who can fight and win. There's a lot of good people I know who either in the race as Republicans or thinking about it, who are good fighters. They fought the good fight. They carry the banner. A lot of them in Washington, but they haven't won anything yet. On the other side of the equation, there's a lot of my friends who are governors or former governors who won elections. They've been elected and then reelected, but they haven't taken on any really big fights. The point we made the other day and have been making in the last week or two is I think voters, not just in the primary, but in America in general, want somebody who can do both, fight and win, not just elections, but win the really big battles that matter to common sense conservatives like us.
And Governor, there's concern that the straw poll phenomenon might be waning in Iowa. In the Iowa straw poll, I've been the MC of it before. It's a raucous, fun event. People have to pay to get into the straw poll. It's like, I think $30, something like that was when I hosted it. But they're concerned that you might not be in the straw poll. I don't know if you've already determined that or not. But this is what Jeb Bush said a few days ago.
If I go beyond the consideration of this and be an active candidate, I'm going to campaign hard here. And I just don't do straw polls.
What's your reaction to that and your approach here?
Well, I love Iowa. I actually lived there for about 7 years as a kid, from 1970 to 77. My dad was a minister at the First Baptist Church at Plainfield, a big town of about 450. But we'll make an announcement about a month from now as to what our intentions are after our state's budget's done. We haven't made any commitments for anything that requires a candidate until we're officially there. But whether we are in or not in, and whether we're in or not in that straw poll or any others, we're going to make if we get in as a candidate, we're going to make a strong play in Iowa. Actually, the neat thing about being around the country is if we chose to get in, I don't think there's a state out there we wouldn't play in. I mean, other than maybe Florida, where Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio are, at least in some of the polls, essentially tied, and they're going to eat up a good amount of that financial advantage that Governor Bush is going to have. Remember, Rick Scott spent something like $100 million
Yeah, a lot.
running for governor there last year, so it won't be that much, but a good chunk of that will be going up to the Florida primary. But short of that, and I think our message, common sense, conservative reform, if we were to get in this election, could play just about anywhere out there. And I think, if we ultimately ended up being a candidate, we'd be focused on the caucus in Iowa and the primaries in places like New Hampshire and South Carolina on down the line.
The president spoke yesterday with some moving words on Memorial Day about the sacrifices of our war dead. And he also added this. Let's listen.
This may be the first Memorial Day since the end of our war in Afghanistan. Several years ago, we had more than 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. Today, fewer than 10,000 troops remain on a mission to train and assist Afghan forces. We'll continue to bring them home and reduce our forces further down to an embassy presence by the end of next year. But Afghanistan remains a very dangerous place.
Your reaction to that is defined as success in the president's eyes, pulling our troops out.
Yeah, it's frustrating. This is something, as we've commonly seen through this administration, where it frustrates me because it appears as though decisions are made more based on political calculation on the political shop in the White House than they are in listening to people out in the cabinet, in this case, out in the field in the military. Because, and this is not just a Republican statement, I think all the way back to Harry Truman, President Truman realized when we went through all that after World War II, to win and then to keep and secure the peace going forward, we had a presence obviously in Germany and in Japan for many years and still do today, not because we wanted to embark on a whole bunch of new wars, but rather because we didn't want to give away the very peace and the victory that our men and women in the military fought for. I worry Afghanistan could be like Iraq.
But Governor, the problem though, and I understand this, but the problem, of course, is that we lost the presidency, right? So we lost because we lost the people on these wars. Obama gets into office after saying, this is what I'm going to do, and he did it. So I would submit we lost Iraq when we lost the people on Iraq. I mean, the American people, which is why we have to have a very clear foreign policy that people understand is going to make their life better here at home, more secure, safer, who knows, maybe even more prosperous. But we lost those people, and they elected Barack Obama, who basically ran as a pacifist. And so that's where we are today. And you look at the public opinion polls, if Republicans think they're going to win the presidency on foreign policy, I don't see that with these polls. Everyone says jobs, wages, education, health care, immigration. I think most of those saying enforcement. Those are their priorities here. Foreign policy, not so much.
I think no doubt the issues you mentioned are high priorities. I do think if Hillary Clinton and the left somehow think that the media is going to give her a pass because she was the former Secretary of State, I would submit that the areas in the world that she's had a heavy hand on during the first term of President Obama are the areas the most messed up around the world. And so that takes a would-be strength away from somebody running for a position of the Secretary of State. But the only thing I'd quarrel with is, and I still think the economy, jobs, more than just jobs, opportunities, upward mobility, the chance that everyone can succeed in living their piece of the American dream. The left measures that by how many people are dependent on the government. I think we, as common sense conservatives, should measure it by just the opposite, by how many people are no longer dependent. But I do think that people recognize, particularly in the last year, that the threat is not something that's just overseas, that when you look at the problems with the Islamic State, with Al-Qaeda, with others around the world, this is not something that's just about containment in the Middle East. This is something that's creeping ever closer to American soil. We've seen it in France. We've seen it in Belgium. We've seen it in Canada. Heck, a month or so ago, we saw even a snippet of it appear to be present in places like Texas. I do think there is a growing concern in America that this administration, this country is not doing enough to ensure that radical Islamic terrorism doesn't grow out of the spots it's at, Syria and Iraq and Iran, for that matter, and elsewhere around the world. And so I do think that's a strong element. But I think you are right that it's still not just about jobs, but about the size and scope. I always thought the problem with the federal government today is it's too big to fail in the eyes of many. We need a government that's small enough to succeed, and that means sending major portions of that back to the states and ultimately to the people.
We're talking to Governor Scott Walker here on the Laura Ingraham Show, and I just learned that our dear friend Craig Shirley took time off from his full-time obsession with his great profession of writing wonderful history books. He's a biographer of Reagan. That he's actually sees something in you that's very Reagan-esque, and he signed on to help out your campaign. That's a big one. Shirley's he's a serious individual, and that turns a lot of heads, I think.
It's huge. Well, it's been helpful. Even last week, we were in Washington, met with a broad coalition of conservative from social to economic and fiscal conservatives out there. It's been interesting. Some of those either candidates or would-be candidates are already starting to violate a little bit of the Reagan 11th commandment, trying to distort a bit of our background. For example, in fact, years ago we talked at the Wisconsin Right to Life dinner when you were a great speaker there. I'm 100% pro-life, have been throughout my whole career. People like Craig are helpful in us getting that information out, not just to the leaders, but to activists all across the country. I've had a long tradition going back to the legislature, standing up for not only the protection of life, but for the sanctity of marriage between one man and one woman, and defended that as governor all the way through the federal court process. So religious liberties are something that are inherently a part of our state's constitution in detail, just like I believe they are in our nation's constitution. People like Craig help us make that case and make it clear that while I'm probably most well known for taking on the big government union bosses, that really I'm a full spectrum conservative. If we got in, if we were to get in the race, we'd want to make the appeal across the board.
There's a piece I just saw, I guess, David Koch was on with Larry Kudlow on his radio show over the weekend, and obviously the Koch brothers are huge forces in the donor base of the Republican Party. They said they'll spend close to $1 billion in a variety of ways, PACs and other efforts, and they will, he said to Larry that they haven't decided it's just one person. They might in fact give donations to multiple candidates. Do you anticipate getting help from them? And obviously you would welcome it, I assume. You need to make up the gap with Jeb.
Yeah, if we were to run, we certainly would do that. I always said you don't need to have the most; you need to have enough to be in the same on the same playing field. And we think we've got a powerful message. We raised the last 4+ years running for governor 3 times. In 4 years, we raised about $80 million. Although there were a lot of big donors, there's no doubt about it. About 70% of our donors were people give us $75 or less. So we know it's not just the big donors. Excuse my voice. It's the everyday American citizens who send us $25 or $50 who say we want someone who's going to stand up and fight, win for us every single day. And I think that's ultimately going to be our appeal if we get in it. Someone that can fight the big fights on common sense, conservative reform after reform, and then win. Not just talk about it, but actually get it done. And I think that's the appeal, big or small life.
Hey, Governor, we're going to send this over to your crew, this piece, so you guys can read it for yourself. But the Hill has a piece about how now Republicans on Capitol Hill, after years of saying, we got to cut government, that they're all now in the spending mood. They want to break through all these budget caps that have helped reduce the budget deficit over the past few years, and quote a number of these congressmen saying, we need flexibility to spend. Do you think that's a smart pathway for the Republicans to go down with the Democrats, increasing federal spending at a time where we've seen some progress on this, cutting spending?
No, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's one of those where if we're just a little bit less bad than the other side, the voters are going to vote for people who are unapologetic, big government tax and spenders out there, and that's what you get out of people like Hillary Clinton, the left. When I came in a week after the 2010 election, I met with all the new Republicans who've been elected in the state assembly and the state senate. Everything was Democrat before our 2010 election, and I said it's put up or shut up time. We're just a little bit less bad than the other side. They'll have every reason to throw us out. The good news was in our state and a lot of other states like ours, after the 2010 election, we did step up and do what people voted us in to do, and we took on the big government special interests. We got taxes under control. We got spending under control.
Right, and you were reelected by a huge, 12 points. You were reelected because you did what you said you were going to do. I don't mean to interrupt you, but This is what I'm
No,
saying.
that's
Is
right.
that Republicans on Capitol Hill are now touting we're working with Obama on free trade. We're not going to oppose them on immigration amnesty. Now we're going to bust through the spending caps. This is just a recipe to get wiped out in the Senate, if you ask me. And I just think it's a complete and utter disaster. One final question. I know we're out of time almost, but have you ever thought of, again, if you run, and I know you're going to run, but if you run, when you run, would you ever consider early on in the primary process banding together with another candidate because we see the power of the Bushes, what they're going to do, the money they're going to raise? Have you ever thought of an early coalition, trying to form an early coalition with another governor, someone like a Kasich, who knows, maybe even a Christie or a Jindal? Or has that ever crossed your mind?
Oh, you'd be surprised as to how many people brought that up. It's one of those things we consider just about every idea that people bring out there. But right now, we're not even in the election, not even in the campaign. If we get in, we're going to make our case, and then we'll see. I mean, as you know, I've been unconventional, so I don't write it off. But we got a ways to go before we can even consider something like that.
I'm always cooking up ideas here, Governor Walker. It's great to talk to you. Congrats on the great performance in the straw poll. Come back anytime. We really appreciate your time. We'll close out this hour.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also, you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.